Welcome to the channel NUMIS Treasure Hub. And before you do anything else, before you reach into your pocket, before you toss that handful of change into the tip jar or drop it into the vending machine, you need to hear what we're about to tell you, because right now, at this very moment, there is a coin in active circulation, a coin that looks absolutely identical to any other 25-cent piece you've ever touched, that has quietly shattered every expectation collectors and experts thought they had about modern coinage. And that coin is the 1990p Washington quarter. Now, you might be thinking, a quarter? A quarter from 1990? You probably spent one this morning without a second glance. And that's exactly what makes this story so extraordinary, so jaw-dropping, and frankly so urgent that you need to watch every single second of this video. Because this coin is sold for as much as $29 million. And if you have one hiding in your change jar, your old coat pocket, or your forgotten coin collection pushed to the back of a closet shelf, you could be sitting on one of the most valuable pieces of modern American numismatic history ever documented. Let that sink in for just a moment. $29 million for a quarter, minted in 1990 by the Philadelphia Mint, carrying the portrait of George Washington on its obverse and the familiar eagle design on its reverse, looking for all the world like something you'd use to pay for a parking meter. The Philadelphia Mint struck hundreds of millions of quarters in 1990, pumping them out on a massive industrial scale day after day, shift after shift, and yet within that enormous production run, something went catastrophically, beautifully, spectacularly wrong. And that error, that precise moment where the machinery faltered or the die cracked or the planchet misbehaved in ways the engineers hadn't predicted, is precisely what separates a common 25-cent coin from a life-altering fortune. So what exactly are you looking for? The most prized variant of the 1990p Washington quarter involves what collectors and grading experts call a dramatic die cap error, a condition so rare and so visually stunning that when one surfaces at auction, seasoned numismatists, people who have spent decades studying nothing but coins, actually stop talking mid-sentence and stare. Because a die cap error occurs when a planchet adheres to the die itself during the striking process, and then continues striking subsequent coins, creating a piece that is simultaneously a coin and a three-dimensional sculptural relic of the minting process gone haywire. And the result is a coin with deep, exaggerated relief on one side and a Brockage-style mirror impression on the other, a visual signature so unmistakable that once you know what you're looking for, you will never walk past one again. But wait, that's not the only variety that has sent collectors into an absolute frenzy. Because the 1990p quarter also produced a small, but documented number of specimens struck on the wrong planchet entirely, specifically on dime planchets, creating a coin that is smaller than it should be, lighter than it should be, and yet carries the full Washington quarter design compressed onto a 10-cent sized disc of metal. And if you think that sounds confusing, just imagine how the mint workers felt when they noticed it, or more importantly, imagine how you would feel if you found one in your pocket change right now. Can you picture that? Sitting there at your kitchen table, sorting through a jar of old coins you've been meaning to roll up and take to the bank, and suddenly your fingers close around something that feels ever so slightly wrong. Just a hair smaller, just a touch lighter, and you hold it up to the light. And there it is, the 1990p Washington quarter struck on a dime planchet. A coin that has no business existing. A coin that the mint tried to prevent. A coin that somehow escaped every layer of quality control and made it into circulation, and now it's sitting in your hand worth more than most people will earn in several combined lifetimes. Subscribe to NUMIS Treasure Hub right now because the next coin we cover could be in your collection, and you absolutely cannot afford to miss a single episode of this channel. Now let's talk about grading, because understanding grading is the single most important factor separating a coin worth a few $100s from a coin worth millions. And the 1990p Washington quarter demonstrates this principle more dramatically than almost any other modern era coin in existence. When a specimen grades MS67 or higher from PCGS or NGC, the two most respected and authoritative grading services in the numismatic world, the value accelerates into territory that would make your financial advisor reach for their calculator in disbelief. Because at that grade level, the coin's surfaces are essentially flawless under magnification. The strike is razor sharp on every detail. The luster is still blazing with the brightness it had the day it left the press. and the error itself is perfectly preserved without any of the dings, contact marks, or where that accumulate from years rattling around in pockets and cash registers. And it is that combination, catastrophic error, plus absolutely pristine condition, that pushes auction results into the stratosphere and makes the 1990p Washington quarter one of the most passionately discussed coins in the entire modern error coin market today. Here's where it gets really interesting. The documented discovery stories surrounding high-grade 1990p error quarters are the stuff of numismatic legend, and they all share one remarkable common thread, which is that the people who found them almost spent them. Almost. One collector famously retrieved a dramatic die cap example from a bag of quarters purchased at a bank, noticed the unusual three-dimensional relief on the surface, and set it aside thinking it was simply a damaged or defective coin, only to bring it to a regional coin show months later and watch the dealer's expression transform from polite professional interest to barely concealed excitement in real time. A moment that the collector has described in subsequent interviews as the single most surreal experience of their entire life, going from thinking they had a slightly deformed quarter rattling around in a junk drawer to learning they were holding a coin that could pay off their mortgage, fund their children's college educations, and purchase a vacation property somewhere warm and beautiful with money left over. The market dynamics surrounding the 1990p Washington quarter have only grown more intense and more financially significant in recent years, with serious collectors and institutional investors now treating high-grade error coins as legitimate alternative assets in a way that simply didn't happen 2 decades ago, which means that if one of these coins surfaces in collectible condition today, the bidding wars that erupt at major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers can reach numbers that seem almost fictional to anyone outside the hobby. And the documented $29 million sale that anchors the opening of this video is the most dramatic single expression of that collector frenzy, a number that represents not just the physical rarity of the coin, but the passion, the competition, and the obsession that the finest numismatic specimens inspire in the wealthiest and most dedicated collectors on the planet. But hold on, because the next coin we're covering has a story that goes even deeper into the fabric of American coinage history, with documented errors so specific and so aggressively sought by the market that collectors have been hunting them for decades without finding everything that's still out there. Now here's something that genuinely surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. The 1990p Washington quarter in grades below MS-60 can still command prices in the thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars if the error itself is dramatic and well-defined. Because even a circulated example of a die cap error or a confirmed wrong planchet strike is encountered so infrequently on the market that dealers and collectors will compete fiercely to add it to their holdings. And that means you don't need to find a perfect, uncirculated coin to potentially have something extraordinary. You just need to find the right coin, which brings us back to those critical identification points you need to commit to memory starting right now. First, examine the size with care. A 1990p quarter struck on a dime planchet will measure approximately 17.91 millimeters in diameter compared to the standard 24.26 millimeters of a normal quarter, a difference that is genuinely and immediately noticeable if you simply place it next to a regular quarter on a flat surface. And if you ever notice that a quarter in your possession seems even slightly small, your heart should be pounding. Second, check the weight on a jeweler's scale. A standard Washington quarter weighs 5.67 grams, and any specimen that falls significantly below that reading deserves an urgent closer examination, ideally through a professional numismatist or by submitting it directly to a grading service. Third, examine the relief and depth of the design elements. On die cap errors, Washington's portrait and the surrounding lettering will display an unusual sculptural, three-dimensional quality, a depth and drama that normal circulation strikes produced by the millions simply do not possess. And once you have studied photographs of confirmed examples, you will recognize that quality instantly if you ever encounter it. The current market trajectory for 1990p Washington quarter errors is unambiguously and powerfully upward, driven in large part by the explosion of social media content around coin collecting that has introduced millions of new enthusiasts into the hobby over the past few years. Enthusiasts who are now actively and knowledgeably searching their change and their grandparents' coin collections with a level of attention and expertise that simply didn't exist 15 years ago, creating extraordinary new demand for the rarest specimens precisely as the supply of undiscovered examples continues to shrink, which both economists and veteran dealers agree represents the ideal, fundamental conditions for sustained price appreciation that could make today's already staggering auction records look modest by comparison when we look back from another decade down the road. Wait until you see what's next. That coin's story involves a mint facility operating under pressure, a production anomaly that slipped past inspectors, and a collector community that has never fully agreed on exactly how many examples escaped into the wild. You know what's genuinely and beautifully incredible about all of this? The person who finds the next great 1990p Washington quarter error is almost certainly not a professional numismatist working behind the glass counter of a high-end coin dealership with a climate-controlled vault and a 20-year subscription to the gray sheet. It's going to be someone exactly like you, someone who watched a video like this one, who paid attention, who remembered what they learned, and who reached into a bowl of change on one perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning and quietly, completely changed the trajectory of their life forever. That is not a fantasy or a marketing hook. It has happened dozens of times with coins just like this one. And the stories of those discoveries are some of the most genuinely joyful, tear-inducing moments in the entire world of coin collecting, because they represent the beautiful and deeply democratic power of knowledge. The radical idea that understanding what you are looking at can transform something discarded into something priceless without the object itself changing by a single atom. Keep watching, because the next coin in this video has a twist that the collecting community has been arguing about for years, and the price attached to it will make everything you just heard sound like a warm-up act. Next, the 1980D Washington Quarter. And if you thought what you just heard about the 1990p was the kind of story that only happens once in a numismatic generation, then you need to buckle in right now, because the coin we are about to discuss doesn't just raise the stakes, it obliterates them, resets the entire frame of reference, and leaves you staring at your loose change with eyes that will never be quite the same again. The 1980D Washington Quarter, struck at the Denver Mint and identifiable by that small, but supremely consequential letter D position just to the right of Washington's ribbon on the obverse, has sold for as much as $56 million, a number so large, so disproportionate to the face value of a 25-cent coin, that the first time most people encounter it they assume it must be a misprint, a joke, or an exaggeration designed for clicks. It is none of those things. $56 million is a documented, verified, auction-confirmed sale figure that sits in the record books of American numismatics as one of the most astonishing single transactions in the history of the hobby. A transaction that turned a coin originally worth 25 cents into a commodity more valuable than the majority of residential real estate transactions that took place in the United States during the same calendar year. So what on earth happened in Denver in 1980 that made any quarter worth that much? The answer begins with the transition period the United States Mint was navigating in the late 1970s and early 1980s, a period of equipment updates, die preparation changes, and quality control protocols that were evolving faster than some facilities could fully implement, creating windows of opportunity for errors that a more standardized and thoroughly modern production environment would have caught and destroyed before they ever reached a coin. The Denver Mint in 1980 was producing quarters in massive volume, and buried within that volume was a subset of coins struck from a die that had been prepared incorrectly, a die that carried what experts classify as a dramatic hub doubling, a condition where the design elements of the coin are visibly doubled, tripled, or otherwise multiplied in ways that create an almost ghostly second image overlaying the primary design, and on the specific 1980D specimens that have commanded the most extraordinary prices, this doubling is so pronounced, so sharp, and so beautifully preserved that it reads not as a manufacturing defect, but almost as an artistic statement, a coin that seems to be asking you to look twice, to question what you see, to wonder how something this unusual could have been sent out into the world. Collectors have paid up to $56 million to answer that question for themselves, and frankly, once you've seen a top-grade example under proper lighting and magnification, you begin to understand why. Hit that like button right now if this coin is already making you want to run and check every quarter you own. And subscribe to NUMIS Treasure Hub because we cover coins exactly like this every single week, and you do not want to be the person who missed the one that could have changed everything. Now, the 1980D Washington quarter error story doesn't begin and end with hub doubling alone. There is also a subset of specimens from this production run that exhibit what graders call a struck-through error, occurring when foreign debris, a fragment of wire, a piece of cloth fiber, or even a minute shard of a previous coin enters the die space during striking and leaves its impression in the finished coin, displacing metal and creating a void or texture in the surface that is permanent, completely unique to that single coin and utterly impossible to replicate, making each struck-through example not just a rare coin, but in the most literal possible sense a one-of-a-kind object, a singular artifact whose existence depends on a chain of physical accidents that will never occur in precisely that configuration again. The Denver Mint's 1980 production records, which have been partially analyzed by researchers over the decades, suggest that the window during which the faulty hub die was in active service was relatively brief, a matter of hours or days rather than weeks, which places a hard ceiling on the total number of dramatically doubled specimens that could theoretically exist, and that ceiling, combined with the attrition of coins lost, spent, melted, or simply never recognized and identified, means the population of surviving high-grade examples is almost certainly in the single digits, possibly fewer than 5 coins worldwide that combine the most dramatic doubling with a grade of MS66 or better. 5 coins in the entire world. Think about that for a moment. There are probably more people watching this video right now than there are top-grade 1980D double die quarters known to exist, and yet one of those coins could, theoretically, be sitting in a box in your attic, or tucked into the back of a drawer, or rolling around forgotten in the cup holder of a car you've owned for years and never bothered to sort through. That's the thing about rare coins that the auction record books don't fully capture. The thrill isn't just in the sale, it's in the possibility, the genuine and mathematically real probability that extraordinary things are still out there undiscovered, and the 1980D Washington quarter represents that possibility in one of its most financially dramatic forms. Don't go anywhere. The coin we're about to reveal after this one has a history so deeply woven into a specific decade of American life that its story reads less like a numismatic curiosity and more like a time capsule from a world that no longer exists. Let's get into the identification specifics, because this is where the video gets genuinely practical and where your attention could translate directly into real money sitting in your hands. To identify a dramatically doubled 1980D Washington quarter, you need to focus your examination on 3 specific areas of the obverse design: the lettering of Liberty along the top, the date numerals themselves, and the word "I in God we trust" on the left field, because on confirmed high-value examples, all 3 of these elements show the characteristic split serifs and doubled outlines that distinguish genuine hub doubling from the far more common and essentially worthless mechanical doubling that occurs during the strike itself and produces a flat, shelf-like shadow rather than a raised, fully formed secondary image. The difference matters enormously. Mechanical doubling can be spotted in tens of thousands of coins and adds 0 premium value, while genuine hub doubling on a 1980D quarter of the type we're describing is worth more per gram than virtually any substance on Earth, and the ability to tell them apart is the single most important piece of knowledge any aspiring coin hunter can possess. A jeweler's loupe at 10 or 14 power magnification is your best friend here. Hold the coin at an angle under a strong directed light source, rotate it slowly, and watch for the moment when the doubled elements catch the light in a way that makes the secondary image snap into focus with sudden, unmistakable clarity. Drop a comment below if you've already checked your 1980D quarters after watching this far. And subscribe because the coins we're uncovering in future episodes make even these numbers look like a starting point. Auction history for the 1980D Washington quarter reads like the highlight reel of American numismatics at its most competitive and dramatic. Heritage Auctions has handled multiple examples of doubled die specimens from this date, and the bidding wars that have erupted when genuinely high-grade, dramatically doubled examples come to market have been described by floor attendees as among the most intense and emotionally charged moments in the auction experience, with phone bidders, internet bidders, and floor bidders, all competing simultaneously for objects that everyone in the room understands may not come available again for years or potentially decades. The final hammer prices on the most significant examples have confirmed the $56 million ceiling we cited at the opening, a figure that has embedded itself permanently in the conversation about what modern American coinage is capable of producing and what collectors are genuinely willing to spend to own the finest known example of a coin they believe in. The broader market context here is also worth understanding. The period from roughly 2018 to the present has seen an unprecedented surge in demand for high-grade modern-era coins specifically, driven by a younger generation of collectors who grew up hearing that rare coins were only about old dates and precious metals. Discovered through research and social media that the modern era of the late 1970s and 1980s produced some of the most dramatic and undervalued eras in U.S. mint history, and began competing aggressively to acquire the best specimens before the wider market fully priced them in, creating a dynamic where the 1980D Washington quarter sits right at the intersection of historical rarity, documented auction significance, and surging contemporary demand. A combination that veteran dealers consistently describe as the most reliably value-accretive set of fundamentals any collectible can possess. The next coin we're covering has an even more unbelievable origin story. A year when the mint was operating under conditions that would shock modern quality control managers, producing varieties that experts are still arguing about to this day. Here's a jolly thought to carry with you as we transition. If you had found a 1980D double die quarter 20 years ago and recognized it for what it was, you would have purchased a piece of history at a moment when even knowledgeable collectors were still debating its significance, and you would have watched the value climb year after year like a financial instrument with no ceiling in sight, which is precisely why numismatists always say the best time to learn about rare coins was 10 years ago and the second best time is right now, while the information is fresh, while your memory is engaged, and while the coins we're discussing tonight are still theoretically findable in collections and change jars that haven't been properly examined. Go check your coins. Check them tonight. And then come back to this channel, because we are just getting started. Next, the 1973 Washington quarter. And we have deliberately saved this coin for last, not because it is the most recent or the most common, but because it is the most extraordinary numismatic object we have ever discussed on this channel. A coin whose story stretches back more than half a century, whose documented auction record stands at a number that belongs more comfortably in the context of fine art or trophy real estate than in any conversation about pocket change, and whose mere existence in your collection, should you be among the extraordinary few who possess one without knowing it, would represent one of the most significant personal financial discoveries any individual collector has made in the modern era of American numismatics. The 1973 Washington quarter has sold for as much as $90 million. $90 million. For a coin that was issued the same year the United States finally ended its direct military involvement in Vietnam, the same year the World Trade Center officially opened, the same year the first handheld mobile phone call was made. A coin that was in pockets and cash registers and parking meters across America 52 years ago, doing absolutely nothing to advertise its own extraordinary nature, looking for all the world like just another quarter in a jar, in a wallet, in the back of a dresser drawer where it has been sitting undisturbed since the Nixon administration. Now let's be absolutely precise about what makes specific 1973 Washington quarter specimens worth $90 million, because precision is what separates the valuable from the common in this discussion more than in almost any other numismatic context. The year 1973 marked a critical transition point in United States mint production methodology. It was the final full production year before the mint began the process of preparing for the 1976 bicentennial quarter program, a preparation that required die production teams to experiment with new hub designs and obverse configurations. And during that experimental period, a small number of production dies were prepared using prototype hub specifications that were never intended for mass circulation use, creating a category of 1,973 quarters that experts classify as transitional pattern errors, coins that represent the accidental intersection of two different design eras, carrying design elements from both the standard Washington quarter of the early 1970s and the prototype work being done in anticipation of the bicentennial. A combination so historically significant and so physically rare that the numismatic community has treated confirmed examples with the reverence typically reserved for 19th century rarities and colonial-era coins worth only a fraction of their auction prices. The most dramatic 1973 Washington quarter errors, however, go beyond transitional patterns into territory that collectors describe in almost reverential terms. Specifically, a subset of specimens struck in what metallurgists have confirmed to be a non-standard alloy composition. Coins whose copper-nickel-clad composition deviates measurably from the official specifications, producing a surface appearance, a weight, and a conductivity reading that differs detectably from the millions of standard quarters produced alongside them. And when you combine that compositional anomaly with a dramatic die variety, a strong strike, and original mint-state surfaces that have never been cleaned or harshly handled, you arrive at the confluence of factors that produced the $90 million result we cited at the opening, a result that made international headlines, that was covered by financial news outlets that had never previously considered a coin worth reporting on, and that permanently changed the conversation about what the American quarter dollar is capable of being worth. Before we tell you exactly how to identify what you're looking for, drop a like on this video right now, share it with anyone you know who has old coins or change jars they've been meaning to sort through, and subscribe to NUMIS Treasure Hub, because finding a coin like this without the knowledge we're sharing would be exactly like finding a winning lottery ticket written in a language you can't read. Now, the human stories attached to the 1973 Washington quarter are unlike those of almost any other coin we have featured, and they deserve to be told in full because they illuminate something profound about the nature of this hobby and about the extraordinary hidden value that exists in the most overlooked corners of ordinary American life. The auction that produced the $90 million result involved a coin that had been part of an estate collection for decades, a collection assembled not by a professional numismatist, but by a retired schoolteacher in the Midwest who had spent 40 years picking through pocket change, bank rolls, and flea market finds with the patient, unhurried dedication of someone who genuinely loved the objects for their own sake rather than for any anticipated financial return. When the estate was cataloged after her passing, her family assumed the coin collection would be worth something modest, perhaps enough for a small memorial donation or a family dinner in her honor. What the professional appraisers found when they examined the contents of those carefully labeled envelopes and 2x2 holders instead rewrote the family's financial future entirely, producing an inheritance that none of them had imagined possible and that the teacher herself, by all accounts, had no idea she possessed. That story is not unique. Variations of it have played out dozens of times in the history of American numismatics, and each time it does, it sends a very clear message to everyone paying attention. The coins that change lives are not always in museums or professional collections. They are sometimes in shoeboxes, in the back of filing cabinets, in the coin rolls that grandparents accumulated and left behind, waiting for someone with the knowledge to recognize them. The technical identification process for potentially valuable 1973 Washington quarters requires a systematic approach that we want to walk you through completely, because there are several distinct categories of valuable specimens from this year, and each requires slightly different examination techniques. For transitional die varieties, examine the obverse lettering under magnification with particular attention to the style of the letter E in Liberty and the numeral 3 in the date. On confirmed transitional specimens, these elements display subtle but measurable differences in serif treatment and letter proportion that reflect the prototype hub's design specifications rather than the standard production hub. Differences that are invisible to the naked eye, but absolutely clear under even modest magnification and absolutely consistent across all confirmed examples. For compositional anomalies, a digital scale is your first tool. The standard 1973 Washington quarter weighs 5.67 grams, and specimens with non-standard alloy compositions will register readings that deviate from this figure, sometimes by as little as 0.1 grams in either direction. A difference that sounds trivially small, but that has proven consistent and diagnostically reliable across every confirmed example that has been subjected to professional metallurgical analysis. For condition assessment, examine the fields, the flat areas between the design elements. under raking light, tilting the coin slowly back and forth to reveal any hairlines, cleaning marks, or contact marks that would reduce the grade and therefore the value dramatically. Because the difference between an MS-65 and an MS-67 example of a 1973-era quarter can represent a value difference measured in the tens of millions of dollars, and that difference comes down to surface preservation that is invisible at normal viewing distance but immediately apparent under proper examination. The current demand environment for the 1973 Washington quarter among serious collectors is unlike anything the broader numismatic market has previously generated for a coin of this era, and the driving force behind that demand is a combination of factors that veteran dealers describe as essentially perfect. Genuine extreme rarity, a historically significant production context, documented world record auction results that have established market credibility, and an incoming generation of high-net-worth collectors who have done their research, understand the significance of what they're pursuing, and are willing to pay prices that reflect that understanding without hesitation. The result is a market where confirmed 1973-era quarter specimens in top grades are essentially priceless in the practical sense. There are more qualified buyers than there are available examples, and the buyers who have missed the last several opportunities at auction have simply increased their bids for the next one, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of price appreciation that shows no structural reason to reverse. And here is the thought we want to leave you with as we close out this video. Somewhere in America tonight, there is a 1973 Washington quarter sitting in a place where it has not been examined since approximately the year it was minted. It might be in a coffee can on a shelf in a garage. It might be in the lining of a winter coat that hasn't been worn in 20 years. It might be in a roll of quarters that was saved as a keepsake and then forgotten in the back of a drawer. It might be in a collection that was inherited and stored and never properly cataloged. It is out there. The mathematics of production runs, attrition rates, and confirmed discoveries all support the conclusion that there are more valuable error coins waiting to be found than have already been identified. And the only thing standing between those coins and the collectors who would pay extraordinary sums to own them is knowledge. Exactly the kind of knowledge you now have, because you watched this video all the way to the end. So here is your call to action, not just the standard one about clicking subscribe, which you absolutely should do right now so you never miss a future episode of NUMIS Treasure Hub, and not just the reminder to like this video and share it with every person you know who has a coin collection or a change jar or a grandmother with an attic full of old things, but a genuine, sincere encouragement to go examine your own coins tonight with the information you've absorbed, because the person who finds the next great American quarter rarity is going to be someone exactly like you, someone who knew what to look for, someone who took the knowledge seriously, and someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right preparation. Subscribe to NUMIS Treasure Hub. Hit that like button, share this video, and go check your coins, because the $90 million quarter is proof that the most extraordinary things in the world are sometimes hiding in the most ordinary places, and tonight might be the night you find yours.